So guys, I've always had this idea that I wanted to give people a voice that most people would never give the opportunity to because of their past. So with those people, I wanted them to have their testimonies on video. So that's what this series is, and it starts right now.
Hi, my name is Kylie, and I want to tell you my story. I went to church until I was about 7. Every Sunday, religiously, no pun intended. But I never had any real role models to show me just what the things meant that I learned in church. I learned all the Bible stories in Sunday school, but I only really knew them with my head, not with my heart at all. I could tell you how many days Noah was on the ark, and I could tell you just what sea it was that Moses parted, but I didn't know what any of it meant. Until my grandma died when I was 7. And she was really the main reason we even went to church. So after she passed, I stopped going, and I didn't have any type of God influence in my life at all. I was very alone. I was abused my whole life as a child. My parents liked spankings, which can be okay, but they took it to an extreme. I would get dozens at a time with a belt as a child. I got called names all the time. My parents asked me if I was stupid. I remember getting smacked if I got a question wrong on my homework. And then we moved. I got away from my family, my cousins and such, and we moved because my dad graduated from college, and I had to start all over. And I was trying to get a fresh start, make new friends, be happy, and try and be the kid that my parents wanted me to be so that I would hopefully stop getting hit so much. I failed miserably. I was suicidal at the age of 9. My parents had to put me on antidepressants because my mom walked in on me with a knife up to my chest, thinking that I could just end it. I got picked on and teased at school. I remember feeling like I never had any friends, was always alone. My sister and I just fought all the time. We were never really very close. I didn't feel like I could talk to my parents. I was just alone. I didn't have anything, and I learned to adapt to that. I learned to be comfortable with that and to stay alone, because if I let somebody near me, they were just gonna abandon me and I'd have to go through it all over again. So I was ornery. I was mean. I was vicious to people. I picked on my sister. I beat up my little brother. I was swearing. I was stealing from my parents. I was just not a very good kid. And then when I was 15, my mom died. She took her own life after a fight that we had had. I had actually come up to her and could not hold on to it any longer. I had to come clean and tell her about things that my father had been doing to me. She didn't believe me. She told me that after the molestation he'd been through when he was younger, that there's no way he would have done that to one of his own kids. And we got in a fight. I left and went to stay the night at a friend's house. And I got a call that night, my mom apologizing to me, telling me she was sorry. And I didn't want to hear it. I was mad at her. So, and I'm 15, so I've had an attitude and I just shrugged it off. And the next morning, my dad came over to my friend's house and had to sit my brother and I down and tell us that my mom had died. The coroner wrote it out as an accidental overdose, but my mother had warned all of us beforehand that if she wanted to take her own life, she could make it look like an accident. To say that I fell apart would be an understatement. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was still my rebellious self, but I hung out with kids who did all kinds of drugs, who slept around, who skipped class. My dad moved us out to California to be near his side of the family and his mom. And I didn't want to be anywhere near him. I blamed him and myself for my mom dying. He thought that moving us would help, that maybe I could get my act together and behave. My grandma started getting me to go to the youth group at church. I went maybe twice. I didn't want anything to do with it. After my mom died, I decided God wasn't real, he wasn't there, and that I really, truly, finally was completely alone in the world and I didn't have anybody. I started drinking. At 16, I used to steal my dad's vodka because my dad was now an alcoholic. I would steal his vodka and put it in a water bottle and take it to school and drink all day. Just keep a steady buzz going. I didn't want to feel anything. I didn't want to be a part of anything. I just was here. My dad decided for some reason that it was a good idea to move his children across the country again and moved us back to Kansas, where I had my first heartbreak and felt the need to try to commit suicide. I swallowed, I don't even know how many pills. I took every prescription bottle I could find and swallowed all of it with some of my dad's vodka. And I remember laying there and screaming and feeling like my whole left side of my body was just on fire. And then everything went black. And somehow I woke up not even an hour later. And I think that was the first time that I thought there must be something different in the world, because I can't believe that that just happened. That day was also the day that I became friends with Benjamin. He was a light, I guess you could say, in everything that was happening in my life. He had faith in me, and even though I treated him horribly, he was always kind to me and had faith in me and just believed in me and tried to show me God. He took me to church once. He kept trying to tell me how God was there and how God loved me, and I didn't really want to listen. One day, I went into his house to wait for him to get ready. We were going to go to the mall or something. And his mom came out. And his mom had never met me before. And she had heard about me from him, I'm assuming, because she sat me down and talked to me and wanted to tell me about God and how much he loved me, and just gave me her testimony. A woman who'd never met me before. And that opened my eyes a little bit. I was confused as to how somebody who didn't know me was so loving towards me and cared so much about what happened to me. Benjamin and I stopped talking. Our friendship ended. I was just so horrible to him. He couldn't take it anymore. We moved back to California. And I had to start all over again as an adult. I'd graduated high school. I was still living with my dad. And I started going to church. Unwillingly. My dad made me. And one day, a song came on. The youth group was playing a song that made me just break down and cry. And I didn't understand why. I just felt something bubbling up. And I just knew that I must have been feeling God. It was like it was like there was finally a light at the end of the tunnel. I wasn't there, but I could see that it was there. And I wanted to go touch it. And just a month later, I was baptized, and I was so happy. I stopped swearing. I stopped drinking. I stopped sneaking out at night. I was trying so hard to be nice to my siblings. I wanted to be a better person. That very next summer, my dad got remarried, and I gained a beautiful, loving stepmom and 2 precious stepsisters, and she is a very good woman. She is very loving. She lives a very Christ-centered life, and she was a wonderful influence as to how I should be. I, however, started college and let myself be influenced by the people that were around me. I thought, these people seem perfectly happy with their partying and their sex, and so why should I have to restrain myself on anything? These people seem perfectly happy. I want to be happy too. And that caused problems at home. I fought with my dad and my stepmom all the time. I was always in trouble. They frequently had to ban me from the house for the day. They told me I could sleep there, but other than that, I wasn't allowed there because I was a horrible influence and I was a horrible force of negativity, and I just brought everybody down. I quit my job because I wanted to focus on school. I thought maybe if I got good grades, that it would counteract all the other bad things that I was doing somehow. And my grades just slipped more and more. I was so distracted by the world around me. My dad decided that with poor grades that I needed to be paying rent, which seemed reasonable. If I wasn't accomplishing school, then I needed to be accomplishing something. I needed to be working and making money and finding out how to support myself. I was an adult. However, I couldn't find a job. I was having a really hard time. The economy was horrible. Partnering it with trying to work around a school schedule, I tried, and there were days that I could have tried harder, but I didn't find anything. And rent was coming due. And if I didn't pay my rent, my dad was going to kick me out. I was going to be homeless. I didn't have anybody that I thought I could turn to. So I started looking around and trying to figure out other ways to make money. I tried selling things of mine on eBay. I tried selling Avon, something I was horrible at. Eventually, I got to the point where I felt like I had no other options. I felt like I had nobody that I could even talk to. Even talking to somebody probably would have helped. So I started taking inappropriate pictures and selling them to strangers on Craigslist. And then I would get money through PayPal and deposit it into my stepmom's bank account and pay my rent that way. This went on for maybe 3 months before my dad decided that, not just my dad and my stepmom decided that I had a month to find a job or get out, because I was just horrible. I was awful. I couldn't find a job. So I prepared to move out and sleep on a park bench when my grandma stepped up and actually took me in. I moved about 2 hours away from my family. She bought me a car. She bought me car insurance, health insurance. She taught me things that I needed to know about the real world, about how to manage a bank account, how to build credit. And she took me to church with her. I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel again. I made friends. I went to a college group and I met people that I just loved, people that accepted me, even though I was far from perfect and was really mean to most of them. And then I met Andrew, who was very tempting. The life he led was very tempting. I got seduced again by drugs and sex and I wanted to not care about what I did and still be happy. So I fell in love with him and I got pregnant. And one day he decided to hit me. So I broke it off. I told him that he could not be anywhere near me or this child until he got anger management and stopped smoking. And he left. He disappeared one day. I didn't know where he went. I didn't hear from him for months. And I was all alone to take care of my pregnancy and a baby. And once again, felt like I had nobody. I knew that there was a God, but I felt like he wasn't going to help me. Why would he help me? I kind of just gave him the big middle finger. Most of my family wanted me to give the baby up for adoption. Everybody thought I was hopeless and that I couldn't do it. And that I was going to have the baby taken away from me because I was just going to be a horrible mother. I started going back to church and was shocked when I wasn't judged and ridiculed for being an unwed, pregnant teenager. I had Zachary, my first baby, and seemed to be doing fine. I was going to church, and I wanted to make sure that even if I felt like God had abandoned me, that he didn't feel like God had abandoned him. So I made sure to keep bringing him. And then I met Nick, and he somehow convinced me that Christianity was a farce and that we were all liars and judges and that it was a horrible place to raise a child, the church. And I let myself listen to him, and I stopped bringing Zachary to church, and I made plans to run away with Nick and go get married. He wanted me to move to San Diego with him, and he wanted to have another baby. I didn't know if I was ready for another baby. Zachary was only 9 months old. But I went ahead and let him get me pregnant anyways. And then he left. He claimed to be Zachary's daddy and then left. And Zachary kept asking for daddy. And I knew that it was my fault. And I knew that I had disappointed God even further. And that I was the horrible mother that everybody thought I was going to be. My son did end up getting taken away from me during that pregnancy. I was depressed. I was taking pills to help me deal with that depression. I didn't want to go see a doctor. I was doing everything to not neglect my son and focused all my attention on him without focusing on me, and I completely fell apart. I had to be hospitalized and put in a mental institution. And he had to go without his mother. I'm told that he wasn't sleeping through the night anymore. He stopped eating and lost weight. But there was nothing that I could do about it. I couldn't work. By the time I looked for work, I was so pregnant, nobody wanted to hire me. I couldn't afford rent anywhere. I didn't get along with any roommates. So I was homeless. I lived at a motel for 2 weeks. I starved most of those 2 weeks and was pregnant. I was afraid I was going to lose my baby. And then one day, while I was sitting in the motel room not knowing what to do, I stopped and prayed. For some reason, it confused me. I didn't know why I was praying because I knew that God had abandoned me. I mean, obviously, I was alone and pregnant and homeless. I thought there's no way he's even going to listen to me. Why would he? But that very day, just a few hours later, I got a phone call from a woman named Carissa who had a room available that was more rent than I could afford, but they were willing to take it down for me so that I would have a place to stay. I moved in the very next day, and I made some of the best friends I've had in a long time who were okay with me being a little crazy and didn't mind that I was struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, as the doctors had finally diagnosed it. And they just didn't care. They didn't judge me. They just loved me anyways. And I stayed with them for 6 months. I had my baby girl, Aiden. She was healthy. And it felt like I'd finally found something. And I just couldn't get out of my head that I'd prayed just a few hours before I had found this home. So after Aiden was born, when she was about 6 weeks old, she started to get sick. She wasn't eating. She had to go to the hospital and get an IV put in her foot because she was dehydrated and she was losing weight, and she just wouldn't eat. It didn't matter what we did. I tried feeding her. We tried breastfeeding her. I tried giving her all kinds of different formulas. I tried feeding her cereal and regular food, watered down, and she just wouldn't eat. She lost a lot of weight and she got very sick. She was always sick. She had to go to the ER again and had another IV put in her foot. She cried all the time. She wouldn't sleep. I went back to church and I prayed again. I thought it worked last time. I really needed it. Maybe it'll work this time. And she started to get better. She started to eat. She started to be happy. She giggled for the first time. And I decided that God was somebody that I needed to depend on. He was there for me when I needed him to be, even though I was a horrible person. So I took a leap of faith and went to an audition for a play that my grandma had told me about, because I thought, what the heck, I need to be more involved in church and I love acting. Maybe this will be something really good for me. And I was blessed enough to play the part of Betsy Tinboom and learned about forgiving and how healing it is to forgive others. And so I started to take count and forgive Nick for leaving, and forgive Andrew for hitting me, and forgive my grandma for taking my son away, and forgive my dad for abusing me. And I started to feel happy. And then something weird happened. On my last performance, I had to die. And while I was dying, I started to cry. Everyone in the audience had told me that they cried, but it never really struck me. And suddenly I found myself on stage crying, unable to get myself together when I went backstage, and just felt like God's hand was on my shoulder, like he was telling me he hadn't abandoned me, that he was there the whole time. I was just refusing to see him. So I've continued going to church. I've joined a Bible study, and I've been meeting with people and hanging out with friends from church rather than friends outside of church. I managed to drag my best friend with me, and now she likes coming to church and is very supportive of me. And despite the 22 years of life, I felt like I was completely isolated and had nobody. Suddenly I have this complete 180 in my life, and I feel like I have this friend with me all the time who is always there for me and is just loving. They say God is love, and there's really no other way to describe it. That feeling you have when you're in love where everything's just perfect is just how I feel. I can have a horrible day and I still go to bed at night with a smile on my face because I know that God is looking down on me with a smile on his face. I get to raise my children to know him. They don't have to go through the childhood that I went through. They can always know that they have somebody that's there for them and that loves them and that will always be there for them even when they mess up and even when they make mistakes. I have needed therapy for most of my life for my post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've needed medication most of my life. And upon truly finding God, not just getting baptized and saying I know he's there, but actually knowing him and having a relationship with him, I sleep at night now. I don't cry all the time. I don't need medication. I go to therapy and my therapist says I'm doing wonderful, that she doesn't understand how this can be happening. God heals. You just have to let him. You have to let him take hold of your life and you have to let him show you how to be happy. I wanted to be with the in crowd because I didn't want to follow God's rules because I thought they'd make me unhappy. And in reality, by finally doing what he wants me to do, I've never been happier. God tells you what you should do for a reason. It's so that your life can be fulfilling and blessed. And there's no way I'm ever going back to the way my life was before.